In this videotape, we're going to talk about feeding performance horses. The approach here is not just to present a lot of impractical information on nutrition and feeding, but what we want to do is to review some biological concepts, to discuss some horse nutrition studies, and then tie those things together into some practical and very progressive recommendations that you might want to consider incorporating into your feeding program. I think you appreciate the fact that feeding performance horses is not just a matter of providing nutrients, but is also managing fatigue, managing heat stress, minimizing digestive disturbances, anhydrosis, and a host of other things that are problems, common problems to performance horsemen. In this video, as an overview, what we're going to do is ask three questions. Question number one is how much total feed do I feed my horses? And that will be both the amount of concentrate and hay. The second question we'll ask is how do you know as a performance horseman if you're meeting the nutrient requirements of your horses? And then the third thing is what unique feeding management practices do you need to employ? Let's get started on this video. Many poor-performing horses simply just aren't fed enough feed. Therefore, it's important to know how much total feed, both hay and concentrate, should be fed daily. To answer this question, we need to discuss workloads, body weights, and hay requirements. Performance horses should be fed according to the workload they perform, light, moderate, or heavy. Light workload horses are used for recreational riding or in certain show classes such as Western Pleasure or Hunter Under Saddle. Light workload horses are easy to feed because their nutrient requirements are low when compared to those of the moderate and heavy working horse. Moderate workload horses are used for ranch or feed yard work or in certain competitive events such as in reining, cutting, team roping, or barrel racing. Moderate workload horses are more challenging to feed as they have increased requirements for certain nutrients above those of the light workload horse. Heavy workload horses can be divided into two subcategories. Some heavy workload horses, such as these race horses, work intensely and explosively for short periods of time. Other heavy workload horses work somewhat less intensely, but for much longer periods of time. An example is the endurance horse competing in a 100-mile ride over a 2-day period of time. Heavy workload horses are the most difficult to feed due to their extremely high requirements for certain nutrients. As might be expected, total feed intake is directly correlated with workload. Light workload horses should be fed 1 3/4 to 2%, moderate workload 2 to 2.25%, and heavy workload horses 2 1/4 to 2.5% of their body weight in total feed daily. With regards to body weights, they can be determined by 4 different methods: guesstimating, using a heart girth tape, taking heart girth and body length measurements and using a body size formula, or lastly, directly weighing on a scales. Accuracy from least to greatest is guesstimating, heart girth tape, body formula, and scale weighing, as was discussed in detail in the Feeding Management of Horses video. Lastly, let's discuss hay needs for performance horses. As was discussed in the Feeds for Horses video, hay satisfies a horse's long roughage requirement, provides nutrients, and keeps the digestive tract, particularly the hindgut, functioning properly. Hindgut health and function is very important in performance horses. Here, microbes synthesize B vitamins and produce volatile fatty acids, which are a source of energy. Also, the hindgut serves as a tremendous storage reservoir for water and electrolytes. High-quality hay is a must in performance horse diets. Never shortcut here on quality. Performance horses should be fed a minimum of 1% of their body weight in long roughage daily. When more energy in the performance horse's diet can come from long roughage, less concentrate can be fed. Therefore, concentrate starch intake problems can be minimized. Performance horse owners can feed legume hays, grass hays, or a combination of the two. Remember that legumes contain higher levels of energy and most vitamins and minerals, and particularly more protein than is present in grass hays. Because of legumes' high protein content, many performance horsemen feed lush grass hay or a combination of legume and grass hays. Before purchasing any hay, evaluate it for maturity, texture, foreign material, leafiness, and color. Don't assume that just because hay looks okay, it has sufficient nutrients. This was highlighted recently in a study where Oklahoma horse nutritionists measured the mineral content of Oklahoma-grown hays and concentrate that were being fed to horses. In this study, the traditional diet of grass hay and oats with a salt block was in many cases deficient in certain minerals. To be sure of your hay's nutrient content, contact your local county extension agent or feed company tech rep and get a hay analysis performed. With this information, your concentrate feeding program can be more finely tuned to more optimally meet your horse's nutrient requirements. Now let's look at a practical example of how much total feed, both hay and concentrate, a performance horse should be fed. A mature gelding's body weight is 1,200 pounds. His workload is moderate. How much hay and concentrate should he be fed? A 1,200-pound gelding, fed at approximately 2.25% of his body weight, should be fed approximately 27 pounds of total feed daily. If at least 1% of his body weight is fed as hay, he should receive approximately 12 pounds of hay daily. The difference is the pounds of concentrate, 15 pounds per day. Obviously, you'll need to adjust concentrate quantities according to individual differences in horses. For performance horses to have the capability to perform at their highest level, their nutrient requirements must be met in a balanced fashion. Let's look at how to meet the energy, protein, vitamin, and mineral requirements of the performance horse. First, energy. Energy feeds provide fuel for work. The amount of fuel energy needed depends upon the workload. To more clearly understand energy requirements, let's look inside a muscle at the two primary energy-generating systems. When a horse is working at a level where adequate cellular oxygen is available, the muscle cells burn fat and glucose for fuel. This system produces no detrimental byproducts. Therefore, muscle cells can work longer. This system is called aerobic, meaning with oxygen. When activity increases, raising the heart rate to 150 to 160 beats per minute or higher, sufficient oxygen often cannot get to or be utilized by the muscle cells. In this situation, the no oxygen system temporarily kicks in. Here, large quantities of muscle, then eventually liver glycogen, are burned as fuels. Here, powerful, explosive work can be performed, but this system produces lactic acid. Lactic acid causes fatigue in muscle cells. Therefore, cells can work for only short periods of time. This second system is called anaerobic, meaning system without oxygen. Horses performing light work are using the aerobic system. Horses doing moderate work, such as this cutting horse, are using both aerobic and anaerobic systems, switching back and forth dependent upon their level of activity. Horses performing heavy work are either primarily anaerobic for short periods of time or are aerobic for such long periods of time that muscle and liver glycogen must eventually be broken down to sustain normal blood glucose fuel levels. From this explanation, it should be evident that when any energy fuel is in limited supply, performance is compromised. If you're going to maximize the energy fed to your performance horses, you must evaluate your feedstuffs. Feed only the highest quality hays. Remember that legume hays contain 15 to 20% more energy than grass hays. Next, feed high energy concentrates. If feeding whole grains, remember that grains contain different energy levels. Straight oats contain 1.1 to 1.3 megacalories of digestible energy per pound, depending upon their weight. Corn contains 1.6 megacalories of DE per pound of corn. However, should be fed in limited amounts and with caution due to corn's high starch content and potential to cause digestive disturbances when improperly fed. If feeding a manufactured conventional feed, which is a feed with no supplemental fat, check the percent crude fiber listed on the feed tag. Remember that when the feed's crude fiber percent goes up, the feed's energy density goes down. For example, a manufactured conventional feed containing 7 to 10% crude fiber provides approximately 15 to 20% more energy than an otherwise similar feed, but with a 12 to 14% crude fiber level. Horse owners feeding high-quality hay with 8 to 10% crude fiber manufactured concentrates to light and most moderate working horses are probably feeding their horses sufficient energy. At higher workloads, horses will need more energy, possibly more than is present in the recommended 2.5% of a horse's body weight in total feed per day. Feeding more concentrate and less hay is an option, but somewhat dangerous as the potential for starch overload, colic, founder, and possibly stomach ulceration increases. To add to this energy intake limitation problem, when performance horses are stressed during hard competition, hauling, and particularly in hot weather, they often go somewhat off feed, voluntarily eating less total feed than required to meet their nutrient requirements. To circumvent these energy intake problems, equine nutritionists have studied other feedstuffs that might provide more energy in a safer fashion and in less total pounds of total daily feed intake. Numerous research projects, many of them conducted here at Texas A&M University by Dr. Gary Potter, have investigated the potential benefits of incorporating oils and fats into horse rations. Studies show that horses will readily consume oil in rations if the oil is introduced slowly and fed at levels of less than 10% of the concentrate portion of the ration. Research studies at Texas A&M University have shown both caloric and extra-caloric benefits for horses fed fat-supplemented diets over those fed conventional diets. Caloric advantage means that less pounds of fat-supplemented concentrate are required than of conventional concentrates to meet energy requirements. From an extra-caloric standpoint, it appears horses fed fat-supplemented rations may use fat preferentially over glucose, which spares or saves glucose and ultimately glycogen. Specifically, studies at Texas A&M University have shown that performance horses fed fat-supplemented rations work harder, work longer, and recover faster after anaerobic work. Horses on fat-supplemented diets also produce less body heat, which decreases their heat stress. Some professional horse trainers have also reported a decreased instance of muscle soreness and tying up in horses fed fat-supplemented rations. However, these benefits have not yet been confirmed in scientific research studies. Performance horse owners wanting to incorporate fat into their feeding programs have three options. Option 1 is to purchase a commercially manufactured, ready-to-feed, fat-supplemented feed. A fat-supplemented feed tag will show 6 to 10% fat, different from the 2 to 3% fat listed in conventional feeds. Option 2 is to purchase a commercially manufactured dry fat supplement to top dress onto your conventional feed. Certain fat supplements also contain protein, vitamins, and minerals, so take this into account when top dressing. Option 3 is to top dress oil at a level of 5 to 10% of the pounds of concentrate being fed onto your conventional concentrate. If you choose option 3, there are 4 points to consider: the type of oil, the type of concentrate, the acclimation days for horses, and when will the benefits be realized. Let's look at a practical example. A barrel racer wants to add 8 to 10% fat to her horse's ration. At present, she is feeding her horse 10 pounds of grass hay and 15 pounds of a 12% crude protein manufactured conventional feed per day. She should do the following. First, purchase a vegetable oil, such as corn oil or a blended oil. Second, change from the 12% crude protein to a 14% crude protein manufactured feed, the latter containing additional vitamins and minerals, so that after the oil is added and the pounds of concentrate fed are reduced, that the feed's nutrient to calorie balance will be maintained. Third, on day 1 through 10, add approximately 1 to 2 ounces of oil on day 1 and an additional 1 to 2 ounces of oil on each subsequent day, 2 through 10. Over the 10 days, decrease the concentrate offered daily from 15 pounds down to 12 to 13 pounds. 1/2 of that is shown here to keep the horse from getting too fat. Maintain the 10 pounds of hay consumption per day. On day 10, the horse will be well acclimated to the oil and will be readily consuming about a pound of total oil per day. Lastly, day 21 through 28. The barrel racer can expect maximal caloric and extra-caloric benefits in her horse as her horse has fully adjusted to metabolizing the oil in the ration. Are many horse owners feeding fat-supplemented diets to hard-working horses? As previously discussed, endurance riders have been feeding oil as an energy supplement for over 20 years. Racehorse trainers are starting to incorporate fat into their horses' diets. Some polo teams, such as ours here at Texas A&M University, are feeding fat-supplemented diets to their polo horses. Christy Waters, captain of the Texas A&M University women's polo team, named 1995 National Intercollegiate Polo Champions, recently said, "Since putting our horses on a fat-supplemented ration, we've noticed our horses go much longer and harder. We've had many less injuries than in past years. Feeding the fat-supplemented diet has really given us the competitive edge. There are two practical methods you can use to see if you're meeting your horse's energy requirements. Method one is to routinely weigh your horses and monitor their body weight so feeding programs can be adjusted to maintain the desired weights. Routine weighing of performance horses, although not common in the United States, is very commonplace among successful professional horse trainers in Europe. Method two is to continually monitor the degree of fatness on your horses. To assist owners with assessing degree of fatness, horse nutritionists at Texas A&M University have developed an easy-to-use scoring system and scorecard, which is included with this video, where horses can be scored 1 through 9 on their degree of fatness. Many performance horse owners ask if there is an ideal condition or degree of fatness for performance horses. According to research here at Texas A&M, horses at a condition score of 5 to 6 have sufficient fat cover to provide adequate energy reserves for work, yet not too much fat cover to interfere with efficient body cooling. Horses at condition scores of 7 to 8 carry greater energy reserves, but this excessive fat cover does interfere with efficient body cooling, which increases heat stress. Horses at condition scores of 4 or lower are deficient in energy reserves. Horse show judges discriminate against horses at lower body conditions, as is mandated in several association rulebooks. Let's now look at the protein requirements of the performance horse. Protein in the horse's body is involved in the makeup of enzymes, blood cells, hooves and hair, but primarily in the makeup of muscle tissue. Crude protein requirements for horses are expressed as the percent of crude protein required daily in their total diet. Total diet meaning everything a horse eats, not just the concentrate portion of their diet. Mature, non-working horses require 8 to 9% crude protein in their total diets. When horses are put into training, many horse owners assume that their horse's crude protein needs will increase dramatically for building muscle mass, repairing injured tissue, and providing fuel for work. Consequently, many horses in training are fed high-percent crude protein diets. Research, however, shows that when horses are being worked, very little additional protein is required over that when non-working. The reasons are that during work, new muscle cells aren't made, the existing ones are just developed further, and only a very small amount of protein is lost in sweat. Also, protein is not typically used as a fuel source. In short, the mature working horse requires only about 10% crude protein in their total diet. When mature horses are being fed high-quality grass hay and a 10 to 12% crude protein manufactured feed and are put into training, just increasing the pounds of concentrate being fed usually will provide adequate protein. It should be noted that the only situation where working horses require a little more protein, even yet, is when they are still growing. 11 to 12% crude protein diet is sufficient here to meet the protein needs of the 2 or 3-year-old. Adding some legume hay or a small quantity of protein supplement to a 10% crude protein ration is a good way to meet the young horse's protein requirements. The bottom line, it's easy to meet the working horse's protein requirement because protein needed is not directly correlated with workload. This is much different than with energy requirements, as we've already discussed. Underfeeding of protein to performance horses typically is not a problem, but protein deficiencies can occur when hard-working horses are fed extremely poor quality grass hay and lightweight oats. Is there a problem with feeding protein over requirements? Yes. The overfeeding of protein to performance horses is commonly practiced in today's horse industry due to the myth that protein, fed above requirements, will provide some additional benefits. This is not true. In fact, protein fed at high levels can negatively impact performance in horses. The reason, protein fed over requirements can't be stored. It must be degraded and voided from the body as ammonia. To void this ammonia, horses drink more water than urinate more. German researchers have reported that extra high levels of ammonia in the digestive tract, blood, and eventually muscles can cause increased sweating, dehydration, fatigue, and an increased frequency of muscle spasms and tying up. High-protein diets are particularly detrimental for endurance horses that are sweating out huge quantities of water and urinating less to conserve water. Here, blood ammonia levels can get dangerously high. With stalled performance horses, increased levels of ammonia in stalls without proper ventilation can cause or aggravate respiratory problems. Lastly, protein is very expensive to buy. The bottom line, shoot for feeding your performance horses about 10 to 12% crude protein in their total diets, realizing that extremely high protein levels can and will cause problems. To check a ration for percent crude protein, the information needed is 1. The type of feedstuffs being fed, 2. The amount in pounds being fed, and 3. The crude protein percent of each feedstuff. Let's look at an example. A horse owner is feeding a heavy workload performance horse 10 pounds of 10% grass hay and 15 pounds of 12% crude protein manufactured concentrate. No protein supplement is being fed. Multiplying the pounds of each feedstuff times their crude protein percent determines the crude protein in pounds the horse receives from each feedstuff in the diet. Add the pounds of actual crude protein being furnished, 2.8 pounds in this example, and the pounds of total feed being fed, 25 pounds in this example. Now, divide the total pounds of crude protein in the feedstuffs by the total pounds of feed being fed. The answer is the percent crude protein in the total diet, 11.2% in this example. Vitamins and minerals are of great concern to many performance horse owners, possibly due to the lack of understanding about horse requirements and the levels of these nutrients in both natural and manufactured feedstuffs. Vitamins are involved with skin, hair, hoof, and bone growth and maintenance, muscle activity, blood coagulation, and energy production. Vitamins are divided into two categories: fat-soluble, those that can be stored in the body, and water-soluble, those that cannot be stored in the body. Minerals are primarily involved with the skeleton, muscle, and enzyme function within the body. The 20-plus minerals required by horses are categorized as major or minor based upon the quantity required. Supplying dietary vitamins and minerals to performance horses is a really simple process. If feeding high-quality grass and or legume hay with the proper quantity of a correctly formulated manufactured concentrate, no supplementation will usually be necessary. The only exception is that during the summer, supplemental white salt should be offered free choice to profusely sweating, hard-working horses to ensure that they are getting enough salt. If feeding hay of questionable quality and or home-mixed rations of cereal grains such as oats, supplementation will definitely be necessary. Here, always provide a trace mineralized salt block. This is because, in addition to the trace minerals needed, the mature horse requires about 2 ounces of salt per day and up to 4 to 5 ounces per day of salt when profusely sweating. A diet of hay and oats contains virtually no salt. Since sodium and chloride cannot be stored in the body to any appreciable extent, the horse has a daily requirement for these minerals. This means that if salt isn't incorporated into the feed, supplemental salt must be provided on the road as well as at home. In addition, when feeding young or moderate to heavy working horses, you might need to feed a complete protein, vitamin, and mineral supplement. Some performance horse owners selectively feed certain nutritional additives over and above their basic rations. Additives can be categorized as B vitamin supplements, hematonics or blood builders, antioxidants such as vitamin E and C, system alkalizing agents, hoof builders, and many others. It's appealing to try some of these products because of their claims. The fact is, these nutrients are already in sufficient supply in most horse diets, especially when high-quality hays, manufactured concentrates, and correctly formulated supplements are being fed. What about electrolyte additives? Some performance horse owners provide supplemental electrolytes to their horses during hot weather. To understand the need for electrolytes, let's again discuss a biological concept. When horses work, their muscles produce tremendous amounts of heat. Sweating is the horse's primary mechanism for cooling down these muscles and the entire body. Unfortunately, sweat carries electrolytes out of the body. Horses at light to moderate work during the summer will sweat some, but usually in lesser quantities for shorter periods of time than does the heavy working horse. Here, body electrolytes can be replaced at feeding time from electrolytes in manufactured feeds or supplements. Therefore, no electrolyte imbalance problems arise. A unique problem can arise, however, when horses sweat profusely for long periods of time and are exposed to less than normal feed intakes. The endurance horse is a classic example of this. Here, excessive sweating can cause dehydration. Dehydration can lead to depressed appetite. Under these extreme conditions, horses are given specific electrolyte supplements immediately before, during, and after the ride. Electrolyte supplements can be top-dressed on the feed, placed in the water, or are administered orally as a paste. Before administering any electrolyte supplement to a horse, check with a nutritionist. First, be sure that you have an at-risk situation. If you do and must provide electrolyte supplements, provide them as follows: the correct formulation, the recommended level, and immediately before, during, and 1 day after the strenuous activity. If you add electrolytes to the water, be sure your horse drinks his normal amount of water. If water is refused, dehydration can be even more accentuated. The Feeding Management of Horses video provided several feeding management recommendations based upon the anatomy and physiology of the horse's digestive tract. Let's review a few of these recommendations, plus add a few more specifically targeted at the hard-working horse. Feed, work around, and handle horses quietly, both in the stall area and during transit, to encourage and maintain good eating habits. Feed only the highest quality hays and energy-dense concentrates. Feed concentrate based on workload. Never feed more than 7/10 of a horse's body weight in concentrate at any one feeding. This means horses at light work can be fed concentrate once daily, horses at moderate work twice daily, and horses performing heavy work should be fed 3 or more times daily. Feed at equally spaced intervals around the clock based upon the number of feedings. Maintain this schedule as close as possible each day. It is best to weigh concentrates to be fed at each feeding. However, this often isn't practical. Therefore, know the weights of your hays and concentrates. Feed hard-working horses 1 to 2 hours before and 1 to 2 hours after strenuous exercise. Feed smaller allotments of hay immediately prior to exercise. Less hay decreases gut fill and minimizes body heat generated from hay fermentation in the hind gut. Feed larger allotments of hay at night when it's cooler. Change feeds gradually. The changeover days depend upon the difference in energy density, physical form, or type of the original and new feedstuff being introduced. Closely monitor weights and conditions or degree of fatness in your performance horses. Maintain horses at desired weights and condition scores of 5 to 6. This is preferable to letting horses get too fat or too thin, then making drastic feed adjustments to take off or add weight. Provide clean, fresh water ad libitum to all horses at all times, with the exception of the extremely hot horse immediately after exercise. Give this horse a few swallows of water at a time, interspersed with walking, until he is completely cooled off. Remember, it may take an hour to cool out a very hot horse. Horses being worked intensely for several hours should be allowed to drink periodically throughout the work as long as they are kept moving. Normal water intake is critical for optimal performance in horses. New Mexico horse nutritionists reported it takes horses 3 days to acclimate themselves to strange water after being transported to strange surroundings and exposed to a different regimen. Some successful competitors haul water with them on the road, others artificially flavor water with Kool-Aid or a soft drink at home, then add the same flavoring to water on the road. It is often difficult to maintain normal feeding schedules when on the road. When in transit, feed horses on their regular schedule. If a scheduled feeding time will be delayed, feed the concentrate or a smaller portion of the concentrate ahead of the scheduled feeding time. Then feed the remainder of the concentrate with full hay after the competition when the horse is completely cooled down. If a feeding time must be delayed for several hours, particularly after a horse has had a strenuous workout, feed more hay and less concentrate at this delayed feeding. Then feed the normal concentrate and hay allotment at the next scheduled feeding. Never feed extra concentrate at one feeding to make up for short concentrate allotment at a previous feeding. Don't change or restrict a horse's ration prior to or on the day of competition. Restriction of this type decreases available energy plus leads to hyperactivity and additional stress a horse doesn't need on competition day. If you run out of feed when on the road, purchase replacement feed in this order. The same feed if available. If not, purchase a feed with the same nutrient composition and physical characteristic. If these feeds are not available, purchase good clean oats. It is often difficult to maintain normal appetites on horses that are being ridden hard and hauled a great deal. Turning horses out for short periods of time in an around pen, in an arena, or preferably in a paddock with some green grass helps improve a horse's appetite. Moderate and heavy working horses in training experience various degrees of muscle soreness termed myositis. Myositis ranges from occasional slight soreness that a horse quickly warms out of to stiffness at the beginning of or during a ride, often called azoturia or Monday morning disease. Here, horses exhibit severe pain, stiffness, won't move, and void brown urine indicative of severe muscle tissue damage. Veterinarian treatment is mandatory. To minimize myositis problems, feed, manage, and train horses to minimize mechanical and biochemical stresses on muscle tissue. To do this, 1. Feed high-energy hays and fat-added rations to reduce concentrate starch intake. 2. Warm up and warm down horses properly. 3. Ride horses consistent with their level of fitness. 4. Minimize physiological and psychological stresses in your training regimen. 5. Decrease concentrate and increase hay intake on off days, plus provide free exercise. And 6. Ride horses lighter a day or two prior to expected strenuous exertion. In review, let's discuss the endpoints of this videotape. Feed horses according to workload. Feed light, moderate, and heavy workload horses 1 3/4 to 2, 2 to 2 1/4, and 2 1/4 to 2.5% of their body weight respectively. Energy is often the most limiting nutrient in the rations of performance horses. To maximize energy intakes, feed high-quality hays. Also, feed energy-rich grains or lower percent crude fiber manufactured concentrates. Feed fat-supplemented diets to moderate or heavy working horses. Maintain horses at a condition score of 5 to 6. Feed mature and growing horses 10 to 12% crude proteins in their total diets. Avoid feeding extra high protein diets that can cause metabolic disorders. When feeding high-quality hays with the proper quantity of a correctly formulated manufactured feed, no supplements will be necessary except white salt as insurance for the heavy working horse. When feeding average to poor quality hays with cereal grains or home mixed rations, provide a trace mineralized salt block. Hard-working and younger horses may in addition need a completely balanced supplement. Provide electrolyte supplements only to at-risk horses on off-routine feeding schedules, working hard for long periods of time, and sweating profusely. Lastly, follow the described feeding management guidelines to maintain appetites, meet nutrient requirements, and minimize heat stress, digestive disturbances, and muscle soreness in your performance horses.